They say wisdom comes with age, but apparently, in my family's eyes, so does being hopelessly outdated. My name is Gertrude, though everyone calls me Gertie, and at 73 years old, I thought I had earned some respect. Boy, was I wrong. Asterisk it started on a Tuesday morning when my grandson Timothy rolled his eyes at me for the 100th time. I had suggested we write thank you notes by hand instead of sending those impersonal text messages. Grandma Gertie, he said with that condescending tone, young people, perfect, so well, you're so old-fashioned. Nobody does that anymore. Asterisk old-fashioned. There it was again. That phrase had been following me around like a shadow for months. When I suggested we have family dinners without phones at the table, I was old-fashioned. When I preferred cash over those confusing card readers, I was old-fashioned. When I wanted to preserve family recipes in handwritten books instead of storing them on computers, I was old-fashioned. Asterisk. My daughter Margaret chimed in from the kitchen. Mother, you really need to get with the times. This isn't 1950 anymore. She was busy ordering groceries on her phone while simultaneously watching some nonsense on her tablet. My son Robert nodded in agreement, not looking up from his laptop where he was apparently working, though it looked more like he was watching videos to me. Asterisk, I sat there in my own living room, in the house I had called home for 47 years, and felt like a stranger. These were the same children I had raised, the same family I had sacrificed everything for. I had worked 2 jobs to put Margaret through college. I had babysat Robert's children every weekend for 5 years so he could build his career. I had opened my home to anyone who needed a place to stay, a warm meal, or just someone to listen. Asterisk, and this was how they saw me. Some relic from the past who couldn't adapt to their modern world. Asterisk, that evening, as I was washing dishes by hand, yes, by hand, because I believe in the therapeutic value of warm soapy water and the satisfaction of seeing immediate results, I made a decision. If they thought I was so hopelessly old-fashioned, then perhaps it was time to show them exactly what old-fashioned looked like. Asterisk, the next morning, I began my plan. Asterisk, first, I called the internet company. I'd like to cancel my service, I told the confused representative. My family thinks I'm too old-fashioned for modern conveniences, so I'm embracing that. The poor young man tried to offer me better deals, but I was firm. By noon, the Wi-Fi was gone. Asterisk, Timothy was the first to notice. He came storming into the kitchen, phone held high like he was trying to catch invisible signals. Grandma, what happened to the internet? Asterisk, oh dear, I said sweetly, continuing to knead dough for fresh bread. I canceled it. It's a modern for an old-fashioned woman like me. Asterisk, his mouth fell open. But I need it for school. Asterisk, in my day, we used books from the library for research. There's a lovely one just 6 blocks away. A nice walk will do you good. Asterisk, Margaret arrived an hour later, laptop in hand and panic in her eyes. Mother, I work from home. I need internet. Asterisk, perhaps you could work from the office like people used to do. I suggested, offering her a cup of tea in my best china. Or, better yet, spend more time with your family instead of staring at screens. But I was just getting started. Next, I called the cable company. No more television. If they wanted entertainment, they could read books, play board games, or have actual conversations like we did in the old days. Asterisk, then came the real surprise. I had been quietly paying for several of their modern conveniences without them knowing. Margaret's fancy gym membership that she used to take virtual classes. I had been covering it as a gift. Robert's subscription to that meal delivery service, because he was too busy to shop. My generosity. Timothy's premium music streaming service and gaming subscriptions. Grandma's treat. One by one, I canceled them all. The reactions were swift and dramatic. Margaret called me crying because she couldn't access her virtual yoga classes. Mother, how am I supposed to exercise? Asterisk, the same way I've stayed healthy. For 73 years, I replied calmly. Take walks, do housework, garden. I have plenty of weeds that need pulling if you're interested. Asterix Robert was equally distressed about his meal service. Gertie, I don't have time to grocery shop and cook. Asterisk, funny, I mused. I raised 4 children, worked 2 jobs, and still managed to put home-cooked meals on the table every single night. Perhaps it's about priorities, not time. Asterisk Timothy's reaction was the most entertaining. He stood in my living room gesturing wildly at his silent gaming console. This is so unfair. All my friends are online right now. Asterisk, then perhaps you should. Visit them in person, I suggested. You know, the way friends used to actually spend time together? But my family's real education was just beginning. I decided to give them a full immersion into my old-fashioned world. When Margaret complained about being bored without her shows, I handed her a needle and thread. Help me darn these socks. Waste not, want not. Asterisk, when Robert grumbled about having to actually go to the grocery store, I sent him with a handwritten list and my old canvas shopping bags. And none of those plastic bags I called after him. Bad for the environment, and we managed just fine without them for decades. Asterisk, as for Timothy, I put him to work in my garden. Video games won't teach you how to grow food, I told him, handing him a hoe. But this skill might actually be useful someday. Asterisk, the first week was chaos. They complained, they argued, they called me stubborn and unreasonable. Margaret even threatened to take Timothy and move out. Go ahead, I said calmly, but you'll need to find your own place to live and pay your own bills. This old-fashioned woman won't be subsidizing your modern lifestyle anymore. Asterisk, that stopped her cold. She hadn't realized how much I had been quietly supporting their comfortable lives. Asterisk. But something interesting began to happen in the second week. Without the constant distraction of screens, they started talking to each other. Real conversations. Timothy told us about a girl he liked at school, something he'd never shared before. Margaret mentioned she was worried about her job security. Robert admitted he was feeling overwhelmed trying to balance work and family. Asterisk by the third week. Timothy was actually enjoying the garden work. He came to me excited about the tomatoes that were starting to turn red. Grandma, look. The ones I planted are growing. Asterisk Margaret discovered she enjoyed hand sewing while we chatted in the evenings. It's actually quite relaxing, she admitted, working on a small quilt square. My mind feels quieter. Asterisk Robert started cooking again for the first time in years. He came over one evening with a pot of soup he'd made from scratch. I'd forgotten how satisfying this is, he said. And it tastes so much better than those pre-made meals. Asterisk, I watched my family slowly transform, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Pride. Not the kind of pride that comes from being right, but the deeper satisfaction of seeing people you love discover their own capabilities. Asterisk one evening. As we sat around my kitchen table playing cards by lamplight, had also embraced the old-fashioned charm of softer lighting. Timothy looked up at me. Grandma, I'm sorry I called you old-fashioned, like it was a bad thing. Asterisk, Margaret nodded, tears in her eyes. Mother, I realize now how much we were taking you for granted, and how much we were missing by always being plugged in. Asterisk Robert cleared his throat. Gertie, you were right. We were so busy trying to keep up with the latest everything that we forgot about the things that actually matter. Asterisk, but I wasn't finished with my lesson yet. Asterisk now, I said, setting down my cards. Let me tell you what old-fashioned really means. It means writing letters by hand because the recipient can hold something you touched. It means cooking meals from scratch because food made with love tastes different. It means having conversations without distractions because the people in front of you are more important than the ones on a screen. Asterisk, I looked at each of them. Old-fashioned means believing that some things shouldn't change just because they can. It means understanding that newer isn't always better and faster isn't always more meaningful. Timothy was listening intently. But Grandma, technology isn't all bad, is it? Asterisk, of course not, dear. I smiled. Technology is a tool. The problem comes when the tool starts using you instead of you using the tool. When you can't sit through a meal without checking your phone, the phone is in control. When you can't sleep without scrolling through endless posts, the screen is in control. Asterisk, Margaret leaned forward. So what do we do? Can't exactly live without technology in today's world. Asterisk, you don't have to, I said, but you can choose when and how to use it. You can decide that family time is sacred. You can choose to cook a meal instead of ordering it. You can pick up a book instead of watching another video. Asterisk, the next morning. I called the internet company back. I'd like to restore my service. I told the same confused representative from weeks before. But when the technician arrived, I had specific instructions. Asterisk, I had him set up the router with time restrictions. Internet access would be available from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays for work and school, and for just 2 hours in the evenings. Weekends would be tech-free except for emergencies. Asterisk, my family protested at first, but not as strongly as I expected. They had gotten a taste of life without constant connectivity, and some part of them had enjoyed it. Asterisk, over the following months, something beautiful happened. My kitchen became the heart of our home again. Timothy would come over after school not to use the internet, but to help me bake cookies and tell me about his day. Margaret started bringing her sewing projects over, and we would work side by side while sharing stories. Asterisk, Robert began a tradition of Sunday dinners at my house, where everyone had to leave their phones in a basket by the door. We would cook together, eat together, and linger around the table talking long after the dishes were cleared. Asterisk, I had given them back something they didn't even realize they had lost: presence. The ability to be fully in the moment, fully with each other. Asterisk, but perhaps the most remarkable change was in myself. I had spent so long feeling dismissed and irrelevant that I had started to believe it. This experience reminded me that my values, my wisdom, and my way of life had value. I wasn't behind the times. I was holding on to things that were timeless. Asterisk, one evening, I was teaching Timothy how to make my grandmother's apple pie recipe completely from memory. The way it should be passed down, he looked up at me with flour on his nose. Asterisk, Grandma, he said, I hope I'm old-fashioned like you when I grow up. Asterisk, I smiled, thinking of all the lessons this experience had taught us both. Being old-fashioned isn't about rejecting the new, Timothy. It's about holding on to the good. It's about knowing the difference between what's convenient and what's meaningful. Asterisk, Margaret overheard us from the kitchen doorway where she was watching with tears in her eyes. Mother, I want to learn all your recipes, the real ones written in your handwriting. I want to pass them down to my children. Asterisk, and I want to learn how to grow a proper garden, Robert added, looking up from the seed catalog we'd been browsing. Maybe start a family tradition of growing our own vegetables. Asterisk, as I looked around at my family, really looked at them without screens between us, I realized that my little rebellion had accomplished something I never expected. I hadn't just taken back control of my home. I had taken back my role as the matriarch of this family. Asterisk, I was no longer the old-fashioned grandmother who couldn't keep up. I was the wise woman who knew which traditions were worth preserving and which modern conveniences were worth embracing. Asterisk, the truth is, I never wanted to live in the past. I just wanted to bring the best of the past into the present. I wanted my family to understand that progress isn't always about moving forward. Sometimes it's about knowing when to slow down. Asterisk, now, months later, our family has found a balance. We use technology as a tool, not a crutch. We have designated times for screens and sacred times for each other. The house is filled with laughter again, the sounds of cooking and conversation. Asterisk, and when someone calls me old-fashioned now, I smile and say, thank you. Asterisk because old-fashioned means I know how to make bread from scratch and comfort someone. Who's crying? Old-fashioned means I believe in the power of handwritten notes and face-to-face conversations. Old-fashioned means I understand that the best things in life can't be downloaded, streamed, or delivered in 30 minutes. Asterisk, my family learned that lesson the hard way, but they learned it nonetheless. And now, when they introduce me to their friends, it's not with embarrassment about my old-fashioned ways. It's with pride in having a grandmother who taught them what really matters. Asterisk, so, if you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, whether you're the older person feeling left behind or the younger person too caught up in the digital whirlwind, remember this? Wisdom doesn't have an expiration date. And neither do the values that truly matter. Asterisk, sometimes the old ways are old for a reason. They worked, they brought families together, they created connections that lasted. Asterisk, and sometimes being called old-fashioned is the highest compliment you can receive. Asterisk, after all, I may be old-fashioned, but I'm also the one they call when they need real advice, real comfort, and real love. Because those things, the truly important things, never go out of style. Asterisk, if this story resonated with you, please consider joining our community by clicking that subscribe button. Your support helps us share more stories about the wisdom that comes with experience and the importance of preserving what matters most. Asterisk. And to all my fellow old-fashioned readers out there, never apologize for holding on to the good things. The world needs your wisdom now more than ever. Asterisk, remember to subscribe to our channel if you enjoyed this story. And share it with someone who might need this reminder about what truly matters in life. Asterisk, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And ring that bell to be notified of more inspiring stories like this one.